But yeah, I think Olgierd's a very underrated card in this deck, or just in general. Like, the card provides really huge value. It has synergy with Giant Toad here. I'm interested in exploring the option better. So I think to make Monster Nest viable, it should have the ability to pull Neckers and Necker Warriors. I don't think Monster Nest literally needs that help, honestly. The problem with Monster Nest right now is less about a problem with the card and more about the problem with Arachas Behemoths and Ancient Foglets' individual cards. The modality this card gives you is enough, and it'll naturally get better over time as there are more Insectoids or Nectar Phrages added to the game. I think this card's at a good power level. I could see it giving a +3 instead of a +2, maybe. But honestly, I think it's fine. Anyway, the Gwentlemen Talk Show is starting now, so I will see you guys over there, and I'll be playing this deck more tomorrow.
Hi, Swim. Years yet. Maybe.
Hey, what's up?
There he is.
So, can we go?
Yep.
Are we good? Okay.
Everyone's ready? Go to talk about Gliss.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Let's go.
Yeah.
All right.
Just make it live.
Well, actually, forgot to mute mics. So, we are. Well, hello everybody. How's it going? That was whoops. Ah man, give me all the monk asses on that one. But no, as always, it is Thursday, so we are here with the Gwentlemen Talk Show. Yep. I'm feeling pretty good about that, but now I missed it today. But no, hopefully everybody is having a good Thursday thus far. It is almost the weekend, soon to be, but let's go ahead and get this thing started. And actually, I'm already seeing an issue. That's not supposed to be doing that. Whoops. Sorry, making some couple of changes cosmetically to the talk show, as you guys can tell already, and it'll be further enhanced later on, but for now it's just a small taste. We want to try and freshen things up around here. But, as always, let's get this started for real this time. I am Dale the White Wolf, joined today by Swim and, as always, Ruben, and our special guest, Noxious. Thank you very much for agreeing to be here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, so, and it's been an interesting week thus far. We've gotten to see not only the Gwentlemen's Open this past weekend with the cast on Monday, but also the patch on Tuesday. So let's just go ahead and dive right into that. So this weather update patch is what they call this. I think it was originally supposed to be a hotfix, and they're like, you know, this is kind of a lot of changes. We're not really a hotfix anymore. This is now our first official open beta patch. Swim, how has it been treating you so far?
I like it. I'm a big fan of basically all the changes, and there was a point in time where, you know, a lot of us were really wanting that patch, but I'm personally really glad they pushed the date back and took the time to make sure everything was smoothened out. Like the first dev stream they showed us, I disagreed with a lot of things there, as did many people, and I was disappointed that they hadn't spent more time buffing things such as Mulligan Squirtel. And it's gone in a much better direction since then. What have been your thoughts, Noxious?
Me? Oh my god. So there's actually a lot. Like, I'm kind of happy that they ended up reviewing a lot of the, as you mentioned, the changes they made in the first patch. And I'm kind of the negative Nancy around the Gwent community, it seems, these days. Whenever I listen to other people, they never seem as frustrated with stuff as I am. The current state of the game is fairly healthy overall. The one thing I kind of wish they did more of is buff some of the bad archetypes, right? Because they're clearly over-tuning and under-tuning right now, trying to find the right balance point for a lot of archetypes. So right now you end up with like Scoia'tael as a faction just feeling kind of miserable. And what works from Northern Realms is it's not quite the whole thing. Some aspects of it do work, but I don't think they're in the top tier range or even I don't think they're necessarily like all their archetypes are getting there. They're close enough though, and I think there's still some work to do with Scoia'tael. Mostly Mulligan, I'd say. Like I think Mulligan and Movement Scoia'tael are failed ideas so far. So I'm hoping the next patch addresses those two.
I definitely have to agree there on some part, on a big part actually with you. But I think that's mainly due to not having enough bronzes yet. And I think once we get like more bronzes to explore archetypes like that, we will definitely have like perhaps make those archetypes more viable. Just having more possibilities in those archetypes. So yeah, I think that's the problem right now.
I don't know if it's necessarily only the bronzes. I think it's silvers, especially. We're taking a look at the Mulligan archetype.
Right.
You look at the Mulligan, it's like, cool. Like, this does something with a Mulligan, this does something with a Mulligan. Cool, like, I got my bronzes figured out. What about my silvers? I've got no support here. There's nothing there. There's no golds that are like... I think there might be a gold. Actually, I don't even think there is. I know there's no
There's
silvers.
Zoltan for movement. For Mulligan, there's nothing. Like, honestly, Mulligan's Scoia'tael right now, and I played it on stream for 3 hours yesterday. I was banging my head against the wall, and every single version that I came up with, the most effective one that I came up with was, like, Siri Dash with Sarah and Johnny. So you discard Siri Dash, cycle, get an extra gold, then play the real Siri, like the actual 5-1, lose a round, get card advantage, cycle her back in the deck to pull Siri Dash again. And it was just like everything I tried with that archetype went nowhere, because even when you get a power spike, it's a bad power spike. It's like you don't even do anything. Like you're getting a few points here and there, but it's never enough. And then I look at what's the name? The Brigades, the guys that get buffed whenever you mulligan.
Mm-hmm.
The Vanguard.
And it's like the way the mulligan system works makes it so you always pitch them because you're going to get them later. And so the archetype is actually getting punished by the way the mulligan system works. So you're always eventually getting the stuff you blacklisted because there's only so many slots in your deck. So I keep wondering exactly how you're supposed to make that deck consistent without any type of deck thinning, because there just isn't any. Like there's no Arachas type cards aside from the Blue Mountains Commandos. It feels bad. Feels just bad.
No, that's one archetype that I think it's neat that it's there, and it's neat that they kind of took Scoia'tael in that direction, because a lot of Scoia'tael previously had been rather one-sided. So we now see a couple of different archetypes coming out from Scoia'tael, but neither of them are really super powerful yet. Like I think currently, like, Scoia'tael's probably the most underlooked faction right now, simply because nothing's really jumping out and being like, man, this is like the go-to deck for Scoia'tael, and like the closest you can get is the movement archetype, sort of, dwarf, sort of. Like it feels like the pieces are there, but not necessarily all of them. Like I'm trying to finish my jigsaw puzzle, and I'm missing like the last 20 or so pieces.
It's basically what Northern Realms had last patch.
Yeah. The thing with Northern Realms too is that I feel like the whole machine archetype was missing like a lot of the reload to be on more infantry, I guess, right? Now that we have the Blue Stripe Scout with the ability to reload your machines, and you've got to be a crewman.
Freshen up.
To freshen up the crew. Sorry. I mean, sure. Now that you have more units that can be like fresh crew, it's allowing for more flexing. God damn that word! Please help. Help me, keywords. But yeah, it's been. I think maybe that's what you need to address. The issue is the mechanic, like the machines might have needed a bit of a power buff, and they got that, and then we have more crewmen, so that's like making that archetype work. But I'm not sure for Scoia'tael Mulligan specifically that's enough, right? Like it doesn't on its own do anything. Like there's no equivalent to crewmen in that faction. Like I can't just jam more mulligans, because at some point with Francesca especially, like mulligans you have too many, and you're mulliganing the same cards all the time, and you just keep getting them. So all you're doing this for is like to buff the brigades, but like what the hell is that even accomplishing? So it's like we needed to have in that deck an upside for mulliganing beyond the little war dancers that come out, because it's just missing a bit more power spike.
No, I definitely agree. But I will say the machines from Northern Realms has been looking rather promising lately, or at least Northern Realms in general has been looking rather promising. I'm not... I find it a very difficult deck to build currently. Like, if you're trying to just go with machines, because you're like, I have way too many bronze cards that I all want in here. And it's coming down to, like, what actually gets cut to the cutting room floor. So I'm really curious from the rest of you guys. What are the machines you're actually running in your machines Northern Realms decks?
Ballistas and reinforced ballistas, basically.
Yep.
I think that's it.
Pretty
I think
much.
a trebuchet, like one of them, is always really cool for me to put in there.
The 2 strength one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a 4 strength lacerate in some cases is just devastating sometimes for your opponent. Not always, especially with this many units that have got agility. But yeah, I think just slapping that one trebuchet in there is a lot of fun.
I wonder though, like because every single time I've built that deck, one of the issues with the archetype I find is winning 2 rounds. It's like I can win 1 round almost guaranteed. Like I'll never struggle to win 1 round. I will destroy you for 1 round. But then the second round is the one that I struggle to lock, and that's where we've seen the Witchers come in with Dandelion and the Renew play on it, and so you just keep getting Dandelion buffs, and that's helped quite a bit for the archetype as like that second wave of damage pushing, of strength pushing. Do you think that's enough consistently to get the deck going? Because you need a lot of deck thinning to achieve the desired result, basically.
I think it's definitely enough to get the deck going and put it in more of a consistent place, but at the same time, it still does feel like you're locked out of using so many of the machine cards. I mean, for example, Siege Platform is really, the numbers just aren't really there on that card, and so many of the cards that scale with the number of the machines, like Stennis and Natalis, just end up being very bad. And in addition to some of the machines, I mean, Ruben mentioned Trebuchet, and Trebuchet isn't really bad necessarily, but it loses a lot of value off of just kind of being redundant with Ballista too much of the time, and Siege Tower doesn't really find places either. It does feel like you are locked out of the actual archetype you're playing for the most part.
I mean, I feel like the Northern Realms shouldn't rely on some neutral cards like that to like the Witchers, to actually make them a little more viable, because without Witchers, the deck would still be lacking in a lot of ways because of all the other decks with their like carryover and through round strength that they gain, like Croc, for example. Because Northern Realms still completely lacks in that regard. They have pretty much nothing except for Foltest maybe buffing up his cards in deck, but that's about it. And I feel like there's nothing in Northern Realms that helps them with that, and then sets them behind a little bit. Like, you used to have medics, which was really powerful and actually gave you a lot of numbers, but now you don't have that anymore.
New
And
medics.
it's like, what do I do at round 3? It's
maybe
just an
we
awkward
need
position.
combat engineers for this faction. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing something like a combat engineer for Northern Realms. Like, if we're not gonna get, like, I don't want to see more. Oh, this guy dies and spawns more stuff. Like, I don't want a trebuchet to spawn too many trebuchets. I don't want medics in the faction. I think they're toxic for the game. To have them everywhere, it just becomes very stale. It looks stale. It can work the same in the end, like the amount of power you carry over, but it would be nice to have the flavor to be a bit different. And I'm not sure what that would be. Like, I don't mind something that lets you keep a machine around for later. So a combat engineer that's a little bit stronger, let's say at 5 strength or something, and gives Resil to a machine. And then you suddenly have like some opening, for carryover in rounds. And then it would become interesting with a normal trebuchet where you can stick that guy to keep around as a machine, even though it doesn't get the crew buff or whatever. There's a lot of room to explore for carryover, because that's definitely, I feel like Gwent is now edging itself in that direction where you need to win 2 rounds, but you also need carryover somewhere to threaten the opponent on that like empty round. Otherwise, you just give it away, and it feels like it's no longer acceptable to just have a dead round to lose. If that makes sense.
Oh, it definitely makes sense.
Totally
it's one of
agree
the
with that.
biggest things that I think Northern Realms is definitely struggling with, is just that it's something Northern Realms has actually always struggled with, and the medics kind of fixed. I'm going to put "fixed" in air quotes on that. Fix that problem, but you look at like old Hinseld, whenever he was just gilding a whole row, and you had I think it was reinforced ballistas that were doing damage on every gold unit, and it's just like, man, if I can get this going, I've won this round. I've got nothing else to do, but this round is mine. Like, I'm progressing on my dailies, I guess.
Oh God, please no. To be fair though, I've been playing with Sheila and Adrenaline Rush. It's been interesting. I've been messing around with that idea, and it's not as bad as I thought initially, like having the AR with some buffs, but it feels like you're just playing a bad dwarf deck, so back to square one.
Back to dwarves then. But no,
yeah.
But no, so they labeled this the weather update patch and changed 3 weathers.
3? Oh, they changed Skellige Storm, you're right.
Right.
Correct.
So, let's go ahead and talk about those a little bit. So after the nerfs, obviously, to Drought going from 3 damage to 2, Ragnar Raw going from 3 damage to 2, and Skellige Storm flipping. Have you really seen, especially the Gold Weathers, have you seen anybody actually running this anymore? Was it enough of a nerf that is just like, nope, off, I hate this card, just give me back my scraps?
Well, Skellige Storm is still pretty prevalent. It's not really too much of a nerf, all things considered, but I have not really seen Ragnar or Drought, and nor do I really expect to.
I've seen it once, but yeah, that was a crazy game. And it was useless, basically. It didn't win him the round at all, and I just, I was playing actually a Northern Realms deck that buffs, all your units with the Surgeons, and I eventually played, the Mage Death Mold as an 8 strength, so my tempo was completely on point, and he wasted a gold card, basically. So it didn't do a whole lot in that game at all. He lost that pretty hard. But for the rest, I haven't seen a single one except for Skellige Storm a few times. That's about it.
Skellige Storm is still nuts. Like, I still think that card is completely busted. I think White Frost and Skellige Storm are completely insane weather effects. And sometimes I'm wondering if it wouldn't be just nice to have no weather effects aside from the silver ones. I really wonder, because, the old purpose of weather was to have, 1 per row. So you had like fog, frost, and rain for each one for 1 row. And now that they've just changed the way the weathers work, a lot of it feels very redundant, right? Like, you have a lot of the same-ish stuff, and then you're going to orient your deck building most often, towards one or the other. And I wonder if it wouldn't be just better to have, let's say monsters get fog, and you give rain to, I don't know, Northern Realms for whatever reason, and then you pitch fog to, or frost to someone else. It's just like, I feel like weather right now, the healthiest ones for me are the silver ones, because they're pretty powerful. The other ones just feel either extremely annoying or useless if I look at the gold ones. So they had to nerf them to the point where they're not appealing anymore, and that just leaves an empty space of, like, what are they supposed to do now? Buffing them back, I don't think, is the option either.
Well, I think especially with the Gold Weathers, it comes down to, it's very troublesome whenever you have these cards that are applying just a raw number on multiple things. So, I mean, easy example with the Gold Weathers, it's 3 damage, or in our case, 2 damage, but multiply it by 3 because it's on 3 different rows. So it's really 6, or it's really 9. So you can't have these, like, it looks like it's just a 1 strength nerf, but it's really a 3 strength nerf, because it's no longer hitting on Gibberclit. And we have the same thing with the Queen's Guards, which also got changed this patch, where you can't just change a number by 1, you're really changing it by 3. But
the Queen's Guards is by 9.
Queen's Guards got wrecked big time for the Graveyard reanimation.
Which ones got wrecked by the Graveyard reanimation? The Reaver Hunters?
Queen's Guards, even for veteran purposes, they got hit hard, I think.
Yeah. Well, the having the extra base strength is better than the veteran, probably.
Yeah. Probably at this point. I just wonder though if if the Gold Weather turns out not to be used at all, is that acceptable for them? Because it's a neutral card, so on one hand I want it not to be used as much. Like, I actually do not like neutral golds very much, as they make the game feel very samey. And I don't mind if they just end up being not played. The issue is then there's design space you might as well just put elsewhere. Like, give them to a specific faction and make them play with that weather and buff it back up. And so it's no longer just, every single game becomes weather versus weather versus weather versus weather.
Yeah. I think at this point, more people are okay with them not being played than them actually being played in, like, or being a meta card. But I am actually curious to the lower ranks, or like, the normal casual games, how much that card would see played there, because we're talking about like the high ranks a little bit and like meta and all. But I'm just curious if like casual players are totally fine with that card, and because there should be cards for them as well, and they are nice cards. They look really good and all, and perhaps that's destined for them.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a good point. I mean, maybe it works better at low ranks as well. Beyond just the aesthetic, maybe it works there. But it brings up, you mentioned weather, and not much weather changed. We had like 3 changes to weather. I just wonder if they plan to revamp the weather system once again, right? Because they've already changed the way weather works about, a dozen times solid. The PTR has some really interesting, weird tweaks on it with the way Clear Skies interacted with it, and then they ended up settling on what they've got now. And I'm starting to wonder if we're seeing them just try to find a solution that does not make weather usable as widely, because clearly they're uneasy about the fact that weather is a thing. But I wonder how much they're willing to compartmentalize its use to certain archetypes, instead of letting just about everybody slap it in a deck. That's one thing I wonder. Like, they seem to want people to play them because they've added Aretuza Adept and stuff, but then at the same time, they're also extremely wary of letting it take over the game.
Yeah, I do agree with you about the neutrality of weather. Like, I do. I would prefer if neutral cards are slightly underpowered, and you were saying that if they're underpowered, then it's a little stale. Although, to be honest, like, that gets kind of fixed when the game just naturally moves forward and there's a larger card pool. Ultimately, a lot of these problems just get solved when there's a larger card pool.
I feel like we've been saying that for a while now.
Yeah. Well, the
larger card pool. Which card pool? I mean, it's been kind of the same size for a long time, right? Like, they haven't added too much.
Oh, we've got some cards added with the open beta. Good old Vabjorn.
Yeah, like Vabjorn.
To be honest, though, I think once that guy gets revised and is like slightly better, that card is actually, it can be completely ridiculous, and with just a little bit of a number change, and it's not even going to be a huge one. It's the concept is sound. It's just the implementation is clearly undertuned. I've been having fun memeing with it, but like when you win against a real deck and you win because of Vabjorn, it's like, this just felt very good. A 13 power ping, pretty sweet.
No, so
how many?
Go ahead.
Good.
No.
How many cards were there actually added in total? About like.
Sure.
It kind of.
No, I lost track.
It's kind of weird to calculate.
Changes.
So in terms of new cards, you probably want to mean basically to include cards like Commando, Neophyte, and Botchling and Lubberkin, which weren't technically new cards added to the game in terms of their arts, but they were tokens before, so they're kind of new cards in terms of a collection standpoint. So you're probably including those, but you're probably not including cards like Summoning Circle, which is a new card, but only because another old card got taken away with the same art, which was lesser.
Oh yeah,
Golem,
the Golem one.
Yeah, the Golem.
Right.
So it is kind of hard to calculate that. I'm not honestly sure.
I wouldn't even put Botchling and Lubberkin in there. Like I like their functionality. Speaking of, you know what? Let's me just take over this Botchling Lubberkin thing. Why are these silvers? Like, this is so wrong. Everything about them is wrong. Like, I want them to be bronzes. I want an archetype that revolves around Botchlings and Lubberkins, even if they're lower power. Like, wouldn't that just be a cool feature? Because I don't know what they're trying to accomplish right now.
So I'm going to have to disagree with you on that, mostly because the premium Botchling terrifies me. Like, I don't want to see any more of them if I have to.
Sure. Fair enough.
Isn't that just another form of carryover then? Like, if they were bronzes, even if they were lower strength, it's like, would you have them with the same mechanics? because I don't know.
Well, they
Well,
could be a lot lower in power, but
It kind of almost can't have the same exact mechanic because right now it's buff all Lubberkins and you're everywhere else, and that when they're bronze, that
well,
becomes
they'd have to be
ridiculous.
2s. Like if they're 2s, then and they buff other stuff by 2, then sure you're getting carryover, but your stuff has to die right away in order to get the value on round 1. So then you'd have to win 2 and 3, because then they'd carry over for powerful, and if they keep wiping your stuff, you just get bigger and bigger ones on round 1. But like they can just leave it up, and if they don't die, then you're good to go. So it's like you'd have to kill them yourself with Yennefer to get anything, like relevant on round 1. So I think there's something to explore there. I just feel like Silvers, it's so depressing to see Bloody Baron, not having anything to do with them, and then here they go, also being terrible on their own. Like no matter Neneke shuffling them back, it doesn't matter. They're still terrible.
I think they're kind of close. I mean, the nerf down to 5 hurts them, but I feel like there's a lot to the idea of that card. I feel like they were trying to implement a lot of tools for those cards. Like even for example, as far-reaching tools as obviously there's Neneki, etc. But even something like Pavetta, in theory, feels like it's supposed to work with those cards, and there is a lot of synergy there. It just doesn't really work right now. But I feel like that effect in theory could be very strong with not even necessarily more points, but just like 1 or 2 more working tools.
Can you build it back around 2 silvers though? I mean, because it would be so interesting.
Yeah.
But then again, it's like if you don't draw them at all, I mean, you have like a few tools to draw them, sure, but if you don't draw those, then you're kind of in a very awkward position. But I would love to see a deck like that, and I agree. The tools right now are very awkward. They are kind of there, but not like on a level that you can make something around it, unless there's some genius out there.
Well, I mean, you can make like 2 Botchling, Lubberkin, Marching Orders, ADC. And that's already 4 silvers. Then you put Neneke, and then you fill in with another spell. So that way you're always guaranteed to pull either Neneke with Alger's Double Cross or, the other guys. So then you just have to find infantry at 6 to make sure you're never pulling those with marching orders. It's like really convoluted. But whatever experimentation I've done with it has been complete failures. So maybe at some point.
Don't forget reinforcements to round out that 6 silver slot.
You've got it. There you go. Nailed it.
Such a good card.
But no, before we move on to our next topic, anything else that anyone wants to bring up about the weather update patch? Just nothing that we've gone over yet. Something that you thought was, I don't know, anything with the weather update patch.
I see like Nilfgaard is not that played as much anymore at all. Like I don't come across a lot of Nilfgaard players anymore. It's like, that's a good thing because I was kind of getting sick of them. I mean, I come across some of them, but it's so refreshing not being like completely Nilfgaards everywhere, and that's kind of fun. But I wish they would come back a little more though. Now that I miss them now. So yeah, it's kind of a roller coaster of emotions.
They might come back. Like, do you think? Because I feel like it's just people with the initial abandonment train kind of giving up on them because they got nerfed really hard. Because I looked at some streams of, let's say, Garuna playing Nilfgaard. Sure, it's not the average player, piling the deck, but it wasn't as good as it was prior. But it's also a lot less dull to watch. Like, it's a little bit more refined. Like, some of the plays you have to pull off to really race ahead, and the timings are not. You no longer just jam everything, no matter what. You actually have to time yourself. I think the biggest nerf might have really been the second change to golems, where you might draw them in the top 3 cards of your deck with John Calvite. That timing change kind of punished them. I feel more than it was crazy bad for them.
Yeah, and then with the spy decks, you can Calvite, and you can be like, hew something that's not a golem, but it can be an emissary, and then that can just find you golems. Like it's a big hit to them, which I feel like is probably a good thing because I wasn't really a fan of that card. But at the same time, the Nilfgaard power level right now, I think they are pretty underrated. By the way, I do think they still do have a lot of potential, despite the fact that not a lot of people are playing them right now. But it does feel like they lost a lot of options.
Good for them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fun. Honestly, they still have the best silvers in the game, pretty much. Like in terms of raw, like the quality of them across the number of them that they have, they've still got all of them, or at least most. So they can live with trying to redefine themselves for a minute. It's fine. I'm sure at the end, like in 2 weeks, they'll come back and Nilfgaard will just be they'll have cycled somewhere in the top
Yeah.
10, at some point.
Maybe we should bring up bears.
Bears. That's in
What's a bear? I've never seen a bear. Who's talking about bears here? No. Not engaging this discussion.
So how do you feel about bears, Noxious?
I actually don't think bears warranted like the 4 strength plus the nerf to like canceling medics. I understand the change to that, like where it pings. I mean, the wording is still a bit off because I actually, it says whenever a unit appears, it pings it, which is it indicates that it should cancel the deployability, but it doesn't cancel it. But it still works. Like a Kadwini Sergeant, like if it pings it first, it won't summon Blue Stripes Commandos, which was a weird ordering issue with the way that works. The thing I don't like about bears now is that they had announced it to be at 5 strength. I'm not sure, like, I don't know what it is a symptom of, but it looks like if people are complaining about something dying, CPR just... I'm not sure if it's intentional overtuning. Like, I don't know if they're doing this to gauge whether or not 5 would have been the perfect spot, because one of the things game devs do very often is they just overtune to hell, and then if it turns out to be too good, they're better off, toning it down afterwards than going at 5 and never knowing if 6 was broken.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's just a case of them probing what the right balance spot is for it. That's the one thing I wonder. Like, do they think it's fine at 6, or are they trying to figure it out?
I'm pretty confident it's the latter, honestly. Like they've shown in their process a lot to do very like kind of experimental updates like that to see how people react to them. And it's really important with these such early stages of the game, like being able to understand your not only your player base but also the limits of the format of this new game. So I do agree with that mentality, even if I happen to disagree with bears at 6.
Even if I happen to hate what's happening to me as I play the game, as I'm in this, like, I'm the guinea pig for this test, and I dislike it, I still must admit that their process makes sense if that's what they're doing.
I'm gonna say something very controversial, but I don't think bears are that strong as everyone is saying. I mean, it's like they're exploding it so much. I'm sure they're strong, but they're not like strong that they have to be in every meme on the Gwent subreddit or like the first mention in every conversation. That's like blowing it up so much, and now CDPR is probably gonna react to that because how can they not?
3.
But then you're just expecting people to come up with their own memes or topics of conversation.
That doesn't work.
You give people too much credit, Ruben.
Yeah, you need to have a circle jerk going, because otherwise you run out of things to talk about on that subreddit. So if, like, the thing about bears too is that, like, they die to so much, but the so much they die to just doesn't get played. Like Spellitel, for instance, just has no. They look at bear and it's like, whatever, mammal. Like, I don't care about you. You just kill them. And the problem is that Spellitel is just weak compared to what it used to be.
Yeah.
It struggles to keep itself afloat. The best versions I've seen of it running around are actually ones that are like hybridizing more troops, more units in instead of just the 3 protectors. Those have been working okay against Skellige, but then you run into all sorts of issues with other decks that don't give you the chance to remove their stuff. And it's just so weird how the bear is positioned in a way that it stifles stuff that could get problematic, and so it's healthy for it to be there. But at the same time, you don't want a meta where there's only 2 decks and everybody else is fighting, in La La Land down in tier 2. It's just not healthy.
And actually, something else that I want to bring up before we move on from the weather update patch is we got these scrap refunds. I'm just curious. So for me, whenever they're like, hey, you get the full refund value on these chart cards that we've changed, which I think is a fantastic move on their part, just a nice way of like keeping, people are going to complain otherwise. We're like, oh, my favorite card got nerfed, and I got nothing out of it. Maybe I'm just the weird one here, but is there any reason not to scrap literally everything that they're letting you get the full value off of?
No.
Especially the premiums.
Yes, especially the premiums. It's the same as it was in Hearthstone. I mean, during this window, there's no reason not to scrap things because you're just opening yourself up for more options, right? Because if you want them, you can recraft them. And like Ruben said, especially the premiums, because unlike in Hearthstone, even more so in this game, you can convert your powder, which can only be used for upgrading cards to premium, to scrap, which can be used for both. So.
Do we expect a change in the store ratio of meteorite powder to scrap? Because the math doesn't add up. Like if I spend 75 or whatever the dollar amount is on 7.2k scraps, I can convert that to a lot more powder when nerfs hit on a specific card. I'm not sure if. Go ahead.
I just in general, CDPR was maybe a little bit too generous here, and that's dangerous to say. But still, if with every patch, like this was a hotfix, and if we're gonna get this much with every patch, we're gonna have a full collection in no time, and pretty much everyone is gonna have a full collection in no time because it's just so. I mean, they're giving so much. They're actually giving so freaking much. It's unbelievable. I almost have a full collection. I didn't even buy that many kegs. It's insane. They have to have at least people buying kegs. How can you? I mean, yeah, it's crazy.
I'm gonna go on a limb and say the next time they patch, I think we're getting meteorite powder on the mill. I don't think we're getting. I'm pretty sure we're not getting 1,600 scraps anymore. I think that's never happening again. They're gonna let us convert premium commons and rares into premiums, but they're not gonna just let us scrap those legendaries for twice their value, because then we just play with a set of non-premiums and we're totally happy to pitch everything else. It's like, I don't know, seems a bit against their philosophy of wanting to encourage people to look at premiums and lag their computer out.
Yeah, it's true. It's good that it's good for me, of course, because I almost have full collection now, and I only bought 100 kegs, and for 100 kegs you should not get full collection at all. But it's still insane. So go ahead, Dale. Move on.
Nope, just saying. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next topic of conversation, which is a quick recap of the Gwentlemen's Open. So for anyone who's not aware, the Gwentlemen's Open was last weekend. The qualifiers were on Saturday, the finals on Sunday, and we did a cast on this channel on Monday. There we go. Days that progress. Makes it easy sometimes. But no, so just a quick... Anything that stood out to you guys? So, I mean, obviously, myself and Swim, we casted the games. Noxious, I'm not sure if you got a chance to see them or not, Gesundheit. But Ruben, any decks, any strategies that really stood out to you throughout the Gwentlemen's Open?
When people signed up in the top 16, what stood out to me was there were a lot of dwarf decks, and you don't see them a lot in the meta, but because it was Strike, you can pretty much ban the weak matchups a little bit, and you can take a win with a deck that's not super versatile. You can take 2 decks that are super versatile and can win most matchups, and you can have one deck that has a super strong matchup against maybe 1 or 2 decks, and you can direct that into playing into a certain deck, and you can have almost a very high win rate with that deck then to get you a free win, so to say. So and I think that's what people were trying to do with Dwarfs a little bit in the second day with Strike. And it was just very interesting to see Strike. But that was something that stood out to me, just Strike in general. It was so good. It was really, really good.
Well, for anyone interested in getting more a full recap on the Gwentlemen's Open, you can over to our site, Gwentlemen.com. We have the VODs, actually, of all of the games that were casted. And we also have an infographic for you, and all of the deck lists from the top 8 players, so you can go ahead and check those out. Bear in mind that we did have the patch that happened, so the deck list may not be 100% as good as they were, but just something to keep an eye on. But I just wanted to bring that up real quick, so let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, which is going to be that's our favorite archetypes so far. So, Swim, let's go ahead and start with you. What
Machines, man.
Liking?
I mean, Machines, I really enjoy it. It plays really uniquely. Just playing for the machine combo in round 1 and the possibly the Witcher combos later, and setting up the machines takes It takes a slightly new way of thinking about certain things, like just setting up the ballistas and stuff. It just feels pretty different compared to most of the decks.
Noxious, what about you?
It's hard because I wanna love the machines as much, but something about the way they work just feels clunky to me. So I'm not there yet in terms of loving the archetype. I do, however, want to play with some more of those reload tools at some point when they start modifying. I'm sure that we'll have more modifications each platform. I thought the appeal for the archetype for me was really bouncing machines back and forth, and that's not really something you can do right now. But in terms of stuff that exists right now that I find amazing to play, I'd say the monster decks with like a hybrid of Frost and Fog post-patch still feels really good. Like, it was good pre-patch, and I still think it's pretty solid given the amount of consume you see, so you can just completely nullify them. And I want to just mention that I'm more than happy to see that Succubus is being played, because that card to me is it just feels like one of the best golds against some of the bigger units. People say Gigny is good. It's like, well, yeah, Gigny's good. He's like 4 plus whatever they had, but then if you can just steal it, that's ridiculous. Like the point swing is absurd. It's like a gold Becker's Twisted Mirror, and then you don't even have the requirement of having a guy on your own side. And now Frightener works with her, so that's even crazier. I've had turns where I just go Succubus next to, Unseen Elder, and then it's like Shackles. Oh, well, GG. It's just the feeling of playing Succubus and Monster is just so beautiful. And that's true of every deck. You don't have to play it in Consume, where I think it's seen most often. That card just works too well with Renew in the current meta. So I'd say Frostfog Monster is my favorite. With Succubus.
What about you, Ruben?
Of course, you know the answer. It's every Northern Realms deck out there, and currently that's machines, because machines kind of work now, and I can play ranked without actually being scared, and that's just a good feeling overall. Because I pretty much love Northern Realms with all my heart, and I will probably will love them forever. And thank you, Swim, for making a good deck.
Hey man, that's what I do sometimes.
Well, there should be some more Northern Realm decks out there, but this one is pretty solid so far. It will probably get a little bit weaker once people really know and get how to play versus it. But yeah, this is it's looking good so far, Northern Realms. It's a lot more viable or easier to build or play than last patch. It was maybe a little bit viable in last patch, but I didn't like the card Reaver Scouts at all. Reaver Hunters, sorry. And I didn't like the card or how they worked, and that's why I kind of bailed on Northern Realms a little bit. So I was forced to play Nilfgaard, and now I can finally go back to Northern Realms. So it's good. It's really good. I love this patch so far because of that. Yeah.
No, I think I agree right now. Machines is looking... It's my favorite right now just because I haven't gotten a chance to test out as much as I'd like from the patch still. So it's good for now, and it's fun, like, from a deck building perspective, just to try and figure out how to jam these things into... You can win one round easily, but you got to figure out how you're doing your second. So that's fun, but I think the favorite that I've played so far was the Northern Realms. I think it could best be described as fighting your deck, like, the whole time, with as many cards that would pull other cards out of your deck as possible. So your opening hand is just this weird, like, I don't want this because this is going to come out. I don't want this because this is going to come out. And you're just fighting, you're like mulliganing trying to get the best starting hand you can. Because Northern Realms can do some, if you can get it going correctly, it's some very powerful point swings, but it's extremely difficult to actually get that hand.
Man, if Northern Realms had Vreehead Officer, you just put your cards back.
The Mulligan is insane.
That would be
difficult
sick.
with a deck like that.
Yeah. Vreehead Officer. That's the guy that lets you mulligan one, and it's like, I wonder if like mulligan is even a Scoia'tael thing now, because I look at Northern Realms and it feels like they're going there. Like they're going in that, like the theme of the faction is going in the direction of shuffling stuff in and then out. They're going for that theme as a side one from the machine one. Like the machine one's kind of the primary one. Then you got the infantry one, and then all the rest is all shuffle stuff out. Like you got Hensel, that pulls stuff out of your deck, and then you got Nenekir that shuffles it back in. You've got a bunch of guys that muster each other, and then it's reinforcement that goes ahead and fetches a card. So a lot of it is about mustering, and in some sense, I guess, reusing resources. But the Scoia'tael Mulligan just doesn't really fit the cards they've got yet, and I feel like it would fit Northern Realms a bit more, oddly enough.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The problem with the Scoia'tael Mulligan archetype is they don't really have enough actual targets to gain value from their mulligans. It's kind of weird. I mean, the only actual target that you can inherently gain value out of mulliganing is basically Elven Wardancer. But it would be better for the Mulligan archetype to have tools that Northern Realms has, such as all these, musters that come out from your deck, the light cavalries, the blue stripes commandos, and even the Temerian foot soldiers as well.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on to our next topic of conversation, which is going to actually be future tournaments. So I can spell tournaments correctly. So just so everybody is aware, we do have the Good Gaming tournaments this Sunday. Passiflora is going to be the first weekend, I believe the 1st and 2nd of June, if I'm not mistaken.
Should be that.
We're actually going to be following up that following weekend. The 8th, 9th is the Gwentlemen's Open for July. So if you guys want to sign up, sign-ups are currently open. As always, I believe every Monday is the Bowstring Tension Cup, and every Tuesday is the TCG Weekly Tournament. I think it's crap. I can never remember their name properly, and I apologize. If somebody could get back to me on that, that'd be great. But no, I want to talk about not just future tournaments, but also past tournaments, since we are lucky enough to have Noxious, one of the finalists in the Challenger tournament. And I'm just curious, your advice, coming from the Challenger, for anybody looking to get into the tournament scene, like what mindset, what preparations can you do in order to help your chances in the tournament?
So frankly, I don't feel like I'm the most qualified to speak on the matter, since I've actually had to do very little work to get there. Getting through the tournament, sure, I did my best once I got there, but I was invited as one of the invitationals, so clearly massive, leg up over a lot of the players that were there. We had Vishra, Pro Neo, Oikumena that had to qualify through, and I forget who the last player was. And it's one of those things where, yeah, right. And I ended up just kind of getting the free pass to the Open. I just thought, there's no chance I'm passing Pro Neo in round 1, but then as it turns out, preparation-wise, his decks were very ladder-oriented and not very much tournament-oriented. So that's one of the few things that came into it, where I think my decks were trying to use the Conquest strategy to... Like, the format fit my decks fit the format better. So that's one thing to keep in mind, where I was isolating a strategy and trying to beat it relentlessly, and that's what it almost lined up to do. And then probably stress, I guess. I don't know. He lost his head. Clearly he just couldn't focus in the rounds that we played, because Pro Neo is a much better player than I am on average, and that series probably should not have gone this way. Some unforgivable missteps on his part led to me winning effectively. I don't think, had he played to the best that he could have, I don't think I would have won. So definitely keeping a cool head is another one of those things. And I guess learning matchups instead of just learning your deck. Once you've learned your deck, learn the matchups, and then find a partner to skirmish with. One of the things that helped me a lot was JJ Pasak, who ended up, it's like no secret, but that guy basically ended up refining, helping me refine the lineup that I had already, which was pretty much what I planned to bring anyway. And then we refined the deck list a little bit, modifying 2 or 3 cards here and there. And then that refinement, and then the practicing, it's like the usual way a certain matchup goes is very different if you have 3 different cards in your deck. And it sounds like nothing, but 3 cards in a Gwent deck is ridiculous. Like, your deck is no longer weak to the same stuff, and you have specific techs. So I'd say knowing your deck and the techs in it and how it affects every single matchup is a really big deal. So it's not even just your deck building on its own that's going to make the difference. Also knowing the matchups.
Would you say your Hearthstone experience helped some bit with all the? I
don't think so. No. I actually, because I've never wanted to compete in Hearthstone. I don't think it's a particularly good game for competition's sake. I disliked the variance of it when I engaged. I did, I think, one tournament in my life in Hearthstone very early on, and I did not like the variance that was inherent to it. So I just stepped away from that. What helped me was probably just because I've been to, in public a lot more than, say, Pro Neo. So I've been in places where I'm the focus of people's attention, and that doesn't faze me at all, right? Like, I only know that people are looking at my mistakes or looking at my plays, and I'm not stressed by it, because at the end of the day, I just have to focus on what I'm doing. So that's probably the only reason it helped.
I will say, don't put yourself down too far with don't put yourself down, because that is some solid advice coming out. So keep your head, practice. I think we've been trying to tell people, and one thing that is really unique about tournaments is that they are not like casuals. They're not like ladder. They are like tournaments, and until you get a chance to experience them, you really don't know what that's going to be like. So that you need to get in and get your feet wet with tournaments, and that's why I always try and make it a point to mention what tournaments are coming up, because they're opportunities for you to get into this tournament mindset, and it's something that can help you out significantly in order to advance in these things. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our next one. So we don't have a meta snapshot for you yet. Obviously, we are working on one, but it's we got to see how things develop, because you can't always have a snapshot right from the get-go. But speaking of how things develop, how are things developing? Ruben, what are you seeing the most on Ranked Ladder right now? What's the meta like for you right now?
Right now, it's mostly Krak for me and Swim's Northern Realms deck. I see those the most. I'm not super high in ladder at the moment, because the TGO kind of held me back from laddering a lot, and but mostly those two decks for sure. Especially Krak is a really, really tough matchup for right now for that Northern Realms deck. So it's kind of, either you win quite easily or quite, with your game plan, or you just, it's such a hard matchup versus Krak. It's unbelievable, and it is just, kind of those two a little bit for me. I mean, that I'm really getting to know right now. For
which Krak deck? I must ask, because there's like a lot of archetypes they're running.
The one still with Morgvarg and some bears, it's kind of, like you said, 3 cards difference. There's a lot of different ones, but the most ones do run bears, and the bears, of course, the memes. But it's kind of the same one from last patch, kind of transferred over to this one, but with a few changes here and there.
Okay.
But I still see Wild Boar, for example.
Okay, so you're talking about the one where they play ships and ping Morgvarg. Because the Krak deck that I think is the best. I'm not sure if it's the best, but I feel like Wounding Crash is just, or even Herald, I think Krak with the Wounding package is completely insane, just in general.
Yeah, you kind of have.
I thought that's the one you were talking about.
It's kind of like some people are mixing it up now. They have like the half of it is like the Morgvarg combo with some ships, and then the other half is like the Axemen, and some really focus on the Axemen part, and some really focus on like the boats part, and some just mix it up completely, and it works in every kind of way for me. Against me, I'd say.
Against you. I mean, the Axemen are like manageable as Northern Realms, because you can ping them through the armor. Like, that's always good. The problem is, once they start getting reanimated nonstop, it's a bit more of a pain.
It's so easy to reanimate them. It's just a pain in the ass.
What are you seeing, Swin?
I'm seeing a lot of Krak. I think it's really powerful. I would say right now, like, Krak decks in general are going to be my pick for the strongest deck right now. And like you guys were talking about, there's a lot of different variations on them. There's some people running Axemen. Now that the Hunters are gone, they freed up a lot of slots for, decks like Axemen, and then cards to further enable them. But secondarily, I think Weather Monsters specifically is pretty strong. The problem is right now with Weather Monsters and Consume Monsters is that there's so much stuff that really punishes Swarm, namely Savage Bears and even somewhat machines from Northern Realms.
That's been my issue, actually. Yeah, you're right. Like, I've been playing quite a bit of that deck, and I think Weather Monsters, while an extremely strong deck, the moment you run into those boards that punish you for going wide, and I almost want to blame Life Coach and JJ for popularizing that playstyle, because I feel like going wide was not as prevalent, and so you had less of that, mass wounding that punished you that much. It was a thing, but it wasn't as crazy as some of the swarm that we've seen. It's been ridiculous. So when there's 1,000 Arachas, then of course that the damage is going to be crazy good. It's going to be worth a lot. So then you see those decks crop up, and it's like, well, it's going to take another 3 to 4 days before people step away from that net deck and then move on to the next one. And then Weather Monsters might turn out better. We're laughing about it, but it's true. Like, Gwent's meta is extremely shaped on, passing, like, what's your past 2K rating right now, which is fairly low in the grand scheme of things. It's getting extremely net decky, and you just run into a lot of the same stuff in massive bubbles of meta pockets. It's crazy.
Yep, and I will say, right now I think Northern Realms machines, specifically the Ballistas, are... I don't know if there's any one, like, deck type of that is refined enough to be competitive at a high level, but I will say that is a deck that just the Ballistas alone is going to shape how the meta turns out, because it as you pointed out, Noxious, it's punishing people from going wide like they are, because it's been the thing to do, because we've kind of shifted towards a more Scorch, Villain, Trettenmirth, Gigny meta, and now it's just like, okay, well, fine, if you don't want me putting all my points in one thing, I'll just spread it out to like 20 different things. It's like, oh, they're all the same, let's just keep punishing that. So it's interesting to see how, like, what deck can emerge from that. We're now having to dodge both being too high and now being too wide, so it's going to be an interesting thing that comes out as being dominant in that type of meta. So I'm not sure if I've seen it yet, but I suspect it's out there lurking. I'm worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, basically what we're seeing now is something that we pretty much haven't seen before, which is unique tools that can punish an entire board for going wide. Like, before, the biggest tool we had was Lacerate. Lacerate punishes you for stacking a single row, but now the Savage Bear and the Ballistas don't care what row you're stacking, and they're going to punish you per card no matter what row you're playing in. Like, very, very early on in the beta, we had Stammelford's Tremors that was very powerful, and we're kind of seeing it reach around that level of power, but it's not really the same in terms of just your ability to punish an entire board of Swarm.
Yeah, if Yalmar wasn't a thing, I'd say Spelltales needs to come back, but then we have, like, can we have Renew not target, like, can we just have not Renew in neutral? I'd like to make a request. Like, can that be like a faction card for someone? What don't faction? Like it in neutral. It's so, like, how do you play around Renew? Like, you can't, right? It's one of those cards where you just accept it if it happens. Like, I don't like that gold card. Maybe I'm the only one, but it just seems like it's always there. It's almost never incorrect to put it in your deck.
I come out on the other side of the fence on this just a little bit, simply because of where Renew was at previously. And whenever it was just rezzing one of your own golds, and it was just not seen really anywhere. And one of the things that was brought up actually on this talk show, I think, is that what do gold special cards need to do in order to see play? And one of the things was just have that extra oomph to them. The power level was just too low, and have them be worth not having a body. And now we're seeing all these gold special cards have that extra oomph and not have that body, and we're like, oh, no, wait a second. So,
okay, interesting.
I'm more on the side of, now that we see these as they are, we're like, man, what do you have to give up on a gold card to not have the body attached, and it's getting this extra oomph? I'm kind of happy with it. I'm happy to see these cards getting played. I could definitely agree Renew could be a faction-specific card. But I almost wonder if they've limited themselves too much with the neutral cards, where I'd like to see Renew not just in one faction, maybe like 2 factions, but not in every faction.
Sure. Yeah, I think this is a good point you bring up, is like the ability to just specify like dual class type systems or dual faction, which sounds a little bit weird, because it's kind of unintuitive, and where would that fit on the card anyway? The the whole idea of neutrals is like on paper, and it's amazing for F2P. Like free to players need neutral cards that are viable to be able to do anything, but like I feel like a lot of the gripe that people have with certain mechanics in the game, or like series problem, could have been entirely avoided if one faction had it. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm going. You're gonna be like, yeah, well, one faction would be overpowered. Sure, okay, it would have a powerful card, but then you can balance that entire faction in its own little ecosystem, accounting for those high power goals without having to worry about everybody running the same stuff. And I think that's potentially an issue, and it's true of every game that has a neutral set of cards. It's always tough to balance when you're talking about a lack of resource costs.
All right, let's go ahead and open it up for viewer questions. So if you have anything that you would like to ask us to discuss, anything that you want to hear more about, we are more than happy to oblige. Just go ahead and throw an @Gwentlemen in the chat, and I can go ahead and see those nice and quickly for you. So any questions that you guys have for us, throw them at us. And while we're waiting for those viewer questions to get in, Noxious, if you don't mind me asking, so you're in the unique position of coming from, you're one of the already established people in the card game scene, and I am just curious, what drove you, like what put Gwent on your radar, and what's made you start playing it and get into it as much as you have?
Well, the first thing was really consulting for it in the alpha, back in the very early days, and at that point, when you're a consultant for a job, usually like they don't require that you're interested in the product as much as that you play test it, and that's that's kind of the expected job. But it turned out that I thought Gwent was one of the games that had the highest potential in the long term. Like I actually think Gwent is one of the games, when I saw it in the alpha in the miserable state it was in terms of balance with a bunch of vanilla units, and that's just not very fun to play. 8 bronze, well, me too. Well, okay, 3 bronze that summons 2 more 3 bronze, like that's not fun to play. In that state, I still thought that if Gwent went the way that it is now, like it has gone the direction that I think it needed to be good, and it's continuing to go that route. I thought that game had the highest potential, so it was on my radar. I didn't think I'd play it too much, and then the invitational to the tournament was a big factor in me putting more time to practice it. And I actually, with the state of closed beta, I did not think I would keep playing Gwent. I actually was on the cusp of kind of, after the tournament, just be done with it. I didn't anticipate I'd win, but that would have changed nothing to my disposition towards Gwent until the open beta was announced, and I looked at what they were doing with the game. And that's when I think I solidified my interest. But my biggest interest to it in the grand scheme of things was really, here's this card game with no resource system. It's not trying to mimic Hearthstone. It's not trying to mimic Magic. It's not trying to do anything that card games have been doing, trying to get onto the hype train of, oh, I'm using cards, haha, let's make big money. They tried to do their own little thing with a unique point system and a best of 3 embedded into the gameplay, deeply strategic, very little variance. Like all these things together just made me want to play Gwent more. And I'm glad to say that the game so far has been a very nice surprise, and I'm hopeful for the future of it, despite my very, very vocal critics of little points about it that I think need to be enhanced. I think overall the game is one of the best that I've played.
Me too.
Nice job. Can you elaborate more, Swim?
No, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. Like, I feel like most of the card games in the past 4 years have been effectively, if not Hearthstone clones, just like Hearthstone almost spin-offs where they ape the same mana system and they try to, add their own specific take on it. And it's, I don't know. It really, Gwent feels really fresh, and I really like the direction we're going with it. And I too have, very vocal criticisms of it, but for the most part, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, well, our first viewer question, do we prefer a stable meta or a more unstable meta?
Depends where I am. Am I in the 2K ladder, or am I in the 3.5 to 4K ladder? I'll take stable up there. and then maybe unstable at the extreme top, where people are experimenting a little bit to counter each other. But I want a stable meta past a certain threshold, because then it's a lot easier to know, what you're looking at matchup wise.
I think it's important to have a bit of a balance, honestly, in general. Like that's kind of where I like it. Right now, we're getting to just kind of the sweet spot. Like before, it was so unstable that like you kind of, it's almost the thing about instability is that it's very interesting. There's high variance, but it's almost impossible to play strategically past a certain point because like you look at the leader, you don't have any idea what to expect. You kind of don't know what to mulligan for. You kind of don't know what to play for. You don't know what your win condition is. So I think it's really important to just find that sweet spot between like something that's too stable when it's been a meta that's been ongoing for a month plus, and when it's just a brand new fresh meta. I kind of like it like a week, maybe a week and a half in.
I like a stable meta, but then I come in with an unstable deck that nobody knows because, I mean, a lot of people and the developers themselves has said that, like, Gwent, if the opponent doesn't know what you're doing or what your game plan is, you have a huge advantage. And that's actually in a part true, but then a part it's also not, because some decks are very, very viable and very, versatile. They can adapt to many, many situations without actually knowing fully what the opponent is going to play. On the highest level, it's probably more like, it matters more. But just on like the normal high ladder, it doesn't really work that well because the ladder decks are very, very versatile and they are tough enough for many situations. And, I wish that in a stable meta worked better. Actually, I actually want to prove that point. But so far, I don't think you can reinforce that point very well. But I'm still waiting for that moment to happen because it must be fun, being a new deck and all. And that is actually not very optimized or anything, but is so unexpected and has so many unique things to it that it actually becomes so unexpected and so hard to play against that you can win a game against a very, very optimized ladder deck. That's something that I want to achieve in Gwent, and when Gwent can achieve that, I think then it's going to become very, very interesting.
I think I prefer more stable meta overall, just because it's nice knowing, like, as much as card games are information games, it's nice knowing what your opponent's got, and that's where you can kind of use it to your advantage by bringing something that's not as stable in the meta yet, but will be. Like, it leads to room for disruption, and that's why I kind of like the stable metas. Whereas unstable metas, you try and disrupt, and it's already disrupted, so you're not, like, you don't know what you're doing. I don't know. I prefer the stable metas more often than not, but let's go with our next viewer question of, where do you think position Scoia'tael, can there be a deck that can still be okay for ladder? So for the movement archetype with Scoia'tael, is there a good enough movement archetype deck? Is it good enough for the ladder?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is that it wouldn't actually end up using as many of the movement cards as you might like. You probably can't run Duldblaffen Marksman. You definitely can't run something like Yorveth. You definitely can't run something like Malena. Ultimately, you can say it's a movement deck, but effectively it would be a deck that would be based around the idea of using Blue Mountain Commandos as a 9-value thinning tool that allow your Mahakam guards and even your weather clearing ones, the Freehead brigades, to be able to achieve a little bit of extra value. I'm not even sure you would run Sheldon Skaggs in this list. You probably wouldn't.
I mean, you would if he strengthened himself and then you necromancy him at some point, but you probably wouldn't play him as it is. No, it's so frustrating because like I want to play movement Scoia'tael so much. Like that deck just seems fun to me. The thing is, I feel like, somebody mentioned that on Reddit. It was interesting to me, and it's been a feeling I've had by playing the deck, is that unless you're pushing stuff around, your stuff is stuck to one row. Like, it's not moving at all. It's the least agile feeling I've ever had playing a faction, I feel, since the open beta, since everything's been moving all over the place. I feel like every deck or faction has been very flexible, but then Scoia'tael, which used to be the most agile faction, is now, it feels very constrained. And so unless you have those tools to move them around, you're going to row stack, you're going to give them good Gigneys, you're going to give them disgusting Frost, which with the change to Frost also makes it worse in some respects. So it's just been it's been kind of dreadful to play the movement deck. Yeah.
Honestly, something that would make them a lot more viable, especially in many of the cards that they want to enable, is if Sheldon Skaggs worked kind of more like Milena. Whereas
Right.
if you play it down and every turn it sent something out of that row, because then you could pull it back and it would keep sending them out, and you'd get your chains and things would be moving at more every turn. But the problem is Milena is the only one that does that and can give you value over time in that way, but she just forces you to row stack, and it's a little more awkward.
Our next viewer question, what do you guys think about the current ladder system and how much it favors playing mini games and win streaks?
Oh, you made a great video on that recently, Noxious.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was great enough because some people missed the point.
That'll happen.
I should have been more clear, but every MMR system is going to reward win streaks. I mean, clearly, because it's trying to, especially in the early days where it's trying to adjust your variation, basically like your rating deviation, and figure out exactly where you place. I guess what I don't like is the decay rate, or worse yet, is the fact that once you reach a certain rating, your ranking is not really reflective of anything. Like being number one on the ladder today does not actually mean much. Because it's the MMR is going to keep inflating at the top, and that's my big point about the video is the MMR never stops going up in this system. It seems like, I don't know what the upper boundary is. But I wouldn't be surprised to see like an 8K rated player by the end of the season. I'm at least expecting 6.5. But it's at the point where with the amount of people playing and the inflationary system, you're never stable ever. Like there's not a point where you can say, all right, my rank is secured. I'm top 10 for the entire season, or like I'm doing so well that I'm the best at Gwent. My win rate is insane. It's like all those factors don't matter because a guy who wins 5 games in a row just passes you straight up. Like he just shoots up, and it's like, well, okay, I guess hot streaks deny consistency sometimes, and I guess that I just don't like the current competitive system, and I'm pretty sure if it stays final like this, no one's going to engage the ladder that plays competitively. They'll just practice with buddies. Any tournament players will not engage the ladder if this is the ladder system that stays, basically. Having seen what Hearthstone does, they have to incentivize people with points to get them to log on. Otherwise, no one even bothers.
Yeah, the way that the ranking system's done right now is a little odd in that it's almost better, like, as you mentioned, there is not really any upper bound, so it comes down to when is the end of the season, because that's the only time that getting rank 1 or position 1 actually matters. That's when your position matters, is when they finally like, all right, this is it, we're done now. Because anytime up to then, like, you could easily just wait. You can sit and wait, because we know that rank 21 is 4,500 rating. Is that correct? 4,600?
48 maybe. I'm not sure.
So
but
it's somewhere up there. But no one's reached that yet, and it's because the way that you gain rating points is for everyone to gain rating points. So if you're going for that, you can just kind of sit and wait and be like, all right, is the majority of the ladder, like, is the top of the ladder at like 5,000 something yet? Sure. All right, let's go ahead and start ranking up, because I'm going to have no trouble at all just shooting up points until I finally get to roughly in the position of the ladder where I'm trying to get these ranks. So it's weird that they have this progression system tied to it with the ranking system, and the only way to do that, it's like a community goal almost, because there's no way you can have the one guy who's gotten to 4,800 when everybody else is sitting at like 2,200. That physically cannot happen, and it's this odd system kind of thrown in on top of it, and I would like to see that fixed a little bit more, because I don't like that it's stuck with the community going for it whenever it's really it's individual rewards, but impossible to do without everybody going for it.
How do you envision that being solved, though?
I'm just going to complain about it. I wasn't going to try and solve this.
Well, I mean, to be fair, though, I think, now I'll just say it outright for me personally, I think tying rewards to rating is ridiculous, and more so in the top, like the top 100 rewards. Like, what is that? Like, you get a title or a frame or whatever. Top 1, you get a frame. I mean, sure, you're going to say it's just cosmetic. Well, it's bullshit, because I'm pretty sure the top 100 are all exactly equal in skill, barring if one of them wakes up with, this foot on the wrong side of the bed one morning or has a headache, on the last day of ladder, it's like these guys are all exactly as good as one another, pretty much. And especially with a high variance inflationary system, you're telling me that basically you're going to reward them for that? Like, that just sounds, to me, that sounds absurd. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And maybe I'm just being a bit, nitpicky, which is probably true, because I always am.
It is very weird. I don't know if I would say top 100 necessarily, but it's pretty strange that there exists such specific things as top 1 or even top 10, just because of that innate variance in card games, even though it's lower in this game. It's, I don't know. I could see a top 10 or a top 20 at most being like the highest threshold, personally.
I remember when ranked came out, and I'm no expert on like K values and all that, but there was something with the K value that was like a little bit wrong, or maybe wrong in some people's eyes. But what I did when that came out was like leveling, and I played like 100 games in like the first 2 days, and I was just testing around, and because there were new cards, and I was testing out Northern Realm stuff, but it was like I had like a 40% win rate because I was just doing some dumb stuff, and at a certain point I gained like 5 MMR for a win, and I lost like my shifts were like almost, I was like stuck at a really low rank because I wasn't doing anything serious, but I only play rank because I don't know, I just don't play casual. That's something, and I was just stuck at that rank like for the whole thing until they fixed like that K value, and now you can just lose 300 games, don't give a shit. The last 50 games you can shoot up all the way to like the top rank. And when they, it wasn't always the case like that, and I guess now there's the inflation system because you can always go up, but it used to like put you in one spot and you were basically like, I call it cursed, because I couldn't move up at all because it was just hopeless for me to do so. But
did you all start at the same point back then? Because I don't remember really playing the game too much back in that era. But because if you all start at like 1300 or 1400 and everybody goes from there, like that's a fine system. I mean, it's not fine if the max level is 15 and you cannot realistically get there because it's like 4K rating. Because that ELO system, if everybody starts around the area, would be like 2.8 as like one of the caps. But like that system can be okay. It's just that people have to start somewhere in the middle of it instead of playing a few games and seeing where you rank, because that's just absurd.
Yeah. It was just the problem with that system for me was, the first 50 games are so important that you actually got up like really high, where it was super like, flexible. You could still rank up a lot, but then it got slower and slower and slower because you gradually got like more on your place, on your spot, your deserved spot where your skill level is. And, when you did like me, just some stupid shit in the ladder, you just fucked yourself completely. And that was the problem with the system. But I guess it could work theoretically, but there's some problems with it as well. There's like problems with both of them, I guess. So
yeah, there's no perfect MMR system, that's for sure. It's just that I feel like the rewards being tied to, so like if ranked is not the final competitive mode, I'm cool with that. Because I think it's great. Like, I'll say one thing. I think it's fantastic that playing ranked gives you so many kegs by the time you're done with the full grind. Like, I think that's absolutely fantastic. Because it's a very generous system. But if the intent is to make people play, like get an inkling of a competitive experience while also building their collection, I think ranked does the job. But when it comes to pure competitive play, it's a turnoff for a lot of people. Definitely is. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I guess that's all I got.
All right, well, our next viewer question, is it really worth it to play those 10 plus power spies? Does the one draw make up for it?
Go swim. Shower me in knowledge.
Well, it depends on the deck. Ultimately, those cards basically allow you to slow down the pace of the round. Basically, you're supposed to use them in situations where points don't end up mattering, which ends up being, when you're too far ahead on round one. Basically, okay, so there is a bit of a sweet spot especially in round 1, where you're between 5 and 15 points ahead of them, where you're ahead enough not to want to put more value into the round you're in, but not ahead enough to want to pass. And cards that put value into future rounds, such as spies or anything with death rattles or buffing resilient units, are plays that are very, very good for those scenarios. And spies are really useful for decks that need plays like that. Or for any deck that can synergize with them, i.e. being able to kill them.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the fact that spies can actually just set up removals in some cases makes them, like, no drawback cycles in some fashion, but it's not the most common scenario, so, like, don't put that out there, I guess. Most people will try to then start playing very specific stuff to make it work, but yeah, basically card drawing Gwent is insane, is the summary. So it's worth 10 power in some cases.
It has to have at least 10 power, in my opinion, though. If it would have any less, like, it would become a little more played for sure, like in pretty much every deck, because it would definitely be worth it.
On that topic, by the way, like, what do you think of the buff to Frightener? Do you think it was necessary, or not? Ruben, since you're talking, it would be played with like 10 power or less. Like, it's 10 power, so it's like the weakest spy, and do you think it needed to be buffed in a way?
Actually, I thought it was fine before. The buff, actually, thank God, doesn't change it that much in terms of power level. It makes it more interesting, certainly, but I don't mind, because I didn't see it that often, and it wasn't like... I mean, it was a decent card, but it did its function, and it did it did it well. And right now, I don't think it will make it like so much more stronger.
Yeah,
okay, fair enough.
I think what I might have actually liked to see with Frightener is if it only scared the unit on one of its sides, like either the right or the left side, because that way you could put it in a weathered row that has a unit in it without having to scare a unit out of that row, but still maintain kind of part of the flavor, and maybe without buffing it to the degree that they did. I do think it definitely is a much better card after that change, though. The ability to pull units is much better in general.
What I like about spies like that, though, is that they have something like some kind of function. It's the same kind of with, like, the clear weather units. Some of them have like, what's the name? The blue stripe scout.
Yep.
Yeah, he had he didn't have a function other than that, and now he got a function as well, and a really quite useful one, and that makes him so much more interesting. It's like the only card that did it right before the patch was the Nausicaa bearer or something.
Standard bearer.
Yeah, standard bearer. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was the only one, and I think that is still a really well designed card, because it does something. I mean, it's situational, and it will get you. It will get you value if you can, complete both. How do you say it? Like, objectives of the card.
Yeah.
And if you can only do one, it's still okay. But cards like that are just great. And I think with the Frightener, it's like the same. It still has like one side that if you complete it, it's okay. But if you can do both and use it effectively, it's like really good. And I think Thaler or something can really have an addition that is something, I don't know what, but it can really have something.
Something else. I really wonder, because I really like that decision for them, to design cars that fit in multiple archetypes and do multiple things. Because you look at Frightener, you're like, okay, this is amazing with Succubus. I can just pull Succubus on the back row. You're gonna be like, whatever. Then I play Frightener, pull your 23 strength Vran and steal it, and you don't see it coming. And in the meantime, I cycle a card, win the round, and you're screwed. So all these little plays that exist because of the change to Frightener are pretty sick, and they seem to be orienting a lot of their design in that direction with like cars that do two things, sort of well, but you have to commit to sometimes one of them only, and that's enough to make it worth it. So those designs to me are the most interesting, because you end up with decks that are flexible, and because they're flexible or have more uses per card, you end up with a little bit more diversity and less linearity of gameplay, so you can hold on to certain things for certain times a little bit better. So that's definitely something that's good about it.
Agree.
Well,
And
speaking of the archetypes, our next viewer question: do we think that the current design for cards is too archetype oriented, or should there be more generalized cards?
I think it's probably too archetype oriented. At the very least, it's well, I mean, so right now it's kind of almost exaggerated by the fact that not only are so many cards archetype oriented and designed to be played in specific archetypes, but all of those cards repeat basically the same patterns, right? Like you've got your spotter and it repeats the same patterns as all of those other cards from the other archetypes that grow, which are the Vanguard, the Pirate Captain, even the Necker, if to a degree. And then there's the Neophyte Warship and the Mangonel analogy as well. Ultimately, I think archetypes are more okay as long as they're more diverse. But at the same time, I'd really like to see more general cards personally.
Yeah, I'll be the flip side of that and say that general cards lead to, decks that all play a bit of weather, a bit of anti-weather, a bit of vanilla 8s, and they just play that against each other. Like the original Gwent was as generalized as it got. It was very vanilla though, but general use cards, you mean stuff like Standard Bearer, right? Where you have a card that can fit multiple decks while having, let's say, 2 uses. The problem with if you make a generalized card that is playable is that if it's ever able to compete with an archetype-oriented card, then you just obsoleted the entire archetype, like in one go. So the issue with Gwent, and it's its biggest challenge design-wise, the devs realized that a long time ago, it seems, based on the way they've been orienting design, is we can't have cards that do things too well without being specialized, because then we end up in this disgustingly stale metagame extremely quickly, because like Gwent there's too little exploration. Like you don't have too much freedom when it comes to deck building. I mean, it's difficult at least to find that freedom because you're very constrained to 25 cards, 15 bronzes. That's not a lot, and then 6 silvers, 4 golds, and so if you don't have archetype oriented design, you end up with this very stale gameplay. And because they strayed away from this, I think the game got better. And I feel like even though we as players look at this and we're like, well, they're putting a railroad and they're asking us to walk on it. It is true to an extent, but that hasn't stopped some card games from being extremely pleasant to play despite that. And I don't particularly mind it, but as long as you mentioned, they trim out the fat, I want to say, the repetitiveness, like, +2, deal 2 damage whenever you do X or Y. Those are the things I'd like to see go. But the general idea of having archetypes that define certain leaders, that I really don't mind.
I'm one of those people that I'm initially very concerned whenever we see all these archetypes where it's just like, because I look at it from a deck building perspective, and so many times you're just like, well, I want to build like a Mulligan deck, and it's like, well, these ones, done. Like it can get very stale in that regard. But on the flip side of that, they seem to be doing a good job of it, because I look at the machine archetype and I'm like, all right, I'm machines, I do this. Why do I have like 26 bronzes in here? Wait, I actually have to decide here? Like, it's not a build your own deck, and that's where I'm liking the direction that they're going with it, where they're just, yes, there's archetypes, but they're just flooding you with options where you can't just have the deck build itself. You can have the deck synergize with itself fairly easily, but it's not building itself, and that's one of the things that I like that they're doing with the archetypes, is not just having this be so dumbed down, and they're giving you the options. And that's one of the things that, if they keep doing that, then I like the archetype system that we have going with the card designs.
I mean, what I think here the fixes to that problem, like Nausicaa is a card that is +4. You can use it everywhere, like literally any deck, or it's not archetype specific at all. While Blue Stripe Scout is it has like a non-archetype specific that is very general, and it has an archetype specific thing. So when you like combine an archetype specific and a general, that is okay for me with cards like that. But if you like combine a general with a general, then you are in the trouble zone, or like in the danger zone of like outvaluing other options and specific faction-specific options. So I think that's the only solution, and that's where they have the danger zone and their safe zone. But it's one of the hardest things to do in design, like design-wise, I think.
Yeah, seems right.
Well, our next viewer question: Do we agree with the Roach nerf? Not necessarily the points, but not being summoned by summoned golds.
I don't. I don't. I think it was fine. Like I think the initial openers on Nilfgaard and Skartel, after you nerf Imperial Golems and everything, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm actually wrong, but I feel like it was okay. I with the ability to just be summoned immediately, because you still have to hit that gold in the first place. Sure, Bruverhoog has a very because of Saskia can always do it, but I thought it was one of the least problematic. Things that came up, and now it's actually made Roach so bad when I play him that I'm just like, yeah, never mind. I don't want to use golds on round one sometimes. Just want to hold on to them, and then, or sometimes I don't even have the gold, and I mulligan Roach, and because of the system of mulligan, I just get Roach back right away. So it's like, yeah, sure, thanks, that's useful. And I guess it's just Roach feels like it's lost its purpose in some way. But maybe it's fine, and I'm just the one who's been playing it wrong. I do feel, though, that it wasn't necessary.
I would have liked to have seen it get probably one of those nerfs, maybe not both of them. I think I preferred getting the strength nerf and being able to keep the ability to be played out, although either way works. Ultimately, Roach was definitely a little too prevalent for a neutral card, I think, before. Like... Especially with cards like Naneki and Asire, just really enabling it. Roach at 5 strength with no qualifications was definitely a little more prevalent than I think neutral cards should be in general.
Yeah, I feel like for the Roach, the strength nerf I think is fine. Like I don't. Maybe the 5 strength was problematic. I never really saw it. We'll see how it is. Do it for, but the not being summoned off of someone's golds. Like, literally, it's mostly hurting Scoia'tael because of Saskia. But then I feel like the other part of it was them just, like, looking at everything that the Calvé combo was doing, where you've got the Imperial Golems, and you've got the Golds, and you've got Roach, and it's like, alright, nerf all of it. This is too bad. Like, what do we touch? Touch everything. Just nerf it all and see what happens. And I wonder if Roach, that second part didn't get caught up in the rush to nerf the Calvé opener.
I think the problem wasn't with Roach, but with other things, and they pulled Roach with the nerf, like all the nerfs. And I don't think that was necessary. Problem was just with some other cards.
I still think again, we've been saying this, but they've been overshooting, undershooting a lot of things, and I have high hopes that Roach goes back to his old ability, where you can still play gold from hand and get him, but then in the few cases where you get the gold from another source, then you still are able to bring Roach back. I think that's okay.
All right, well, our next viewer question, what do you think about Aridin as a leader? Is he completely outshined by Dagon and Unseen Elder now?
Not necessarily completely, but he's feeling a bit outshined. I mean, the biggest problem with Aridin is not so much a problem with Aridin himself, but more a problem with the Wild Hunt and the Wild Hunt archetype as a whole. The Wild Hunt archetype is held together by literally one single card, which is Wild Hunt Navigator. The archetype perk is basically play all these cards and then you can run Reaver Scouts in your monster deck, and that's not really worth it. But ultimately, it's not even that bad. I would say it's very minorly outshined, maybe.
Minorly? Maybe. I just feel like I like what they did with the leader, by the way. Like, I used to say Aridin was just a boring ass leader. You just play him. It's like 10 strength, big body, great. It's fantastic. It just feels better now where you're splitting the strength over flexibility, too. The big issue, I think, is that unlike Dagon, he doesn't thin, and unlike Unseen Elder, he doesn't create an insane amount of power with Neckers, and it doesn't have the ability to protect anything. So it's really just trying to get you to thin your deck with the Navigator, but that's on its own kind of redundant sometimes because you end up trying to summon another copy of Wild Hunt Hound, and then sometimes you don't have Frost anymore. There are spots where that's just not good enough. So Aridin is a really, I feel like, all-in round one type leader. Whenever I see him played, it's like you just jam this crazy round one push, and then you're left with questionable follow-up. It doesn't make it unwinnable with, but you do lack the recurrent power of, say, Foglets that you'll find in Dagon.
Well, our next viewer question, do you think it would be interesting if we could pick an extra silver for each non-used gold slot? So you could have a deck with 7 silvers and 3 golds.
I suggested that a long time ago, but I don't think it was. I don't think they. I mean, who would do it is the question. It's like one of these options where, hey, you can have 25 bronzes, and I'm like, nope, I'll take my golds and silvers. So there might be a world in which, if old spear tip is a silver, I'm like, yep, keep me in. I want my crones, I want my spear tip, I want all that good stuff. But there are so many upsides to golds. Actually, the game is oddly reliant on golds in many ways, and I feel like that's one of the frustrations of matches sometimes is who finds the most goals. There are matchups that come down literally to that, and I wish there was an insurance against that. I wish there was some way to ensure that everybody has an opener that's within their deck, contains a certain amount of golds to make it a little bit more even. Because that's one source of frustration that I've had with and it's actually aggravated by the Mulligan. When you pitch, bronzes. Like, let's say Necker Warrior pitched that guy back, on the following round, your redraw is not going to be that gold at the bottom of your deck. It's going to be the Necker Warrior again. So it just makes the whole starvation even more frustrating. Not a bug, just a feature, Mulligan. It's just one of those things where the gold would be nice if it were equalized a little bit more. And that just speaks to the strength of gold cards. So I don't think people would play more silvers if they were given more slots to do that, at least not very often.
Yeah, people definitely wouldn't. I honestly kind of like the idea of it. This is an idea that's been around for just a really long time, since basically the start of closed beta. And I'm starting to kind of like the idea of it, although as Noxious said, it's really not going to be seen in basically almost any deck. It just is something that does allow a little bit of deck building freedom for really strange decks that really, really, really have a 7th silver that they want to fit in, which would be super niche. But
yeah.
I mean, I think that's pretty dangerous, actually. Like allowing to, but there are clear borders now, and we cannot surpass those borders at all. And opening those up with a huge drawback is still dangerous, in my opinion. There will be cases where that is just scary. I mean, right now. There is probably not an example, but there will be for sure a point where a deck really abuses that. I mean, when we have more cards, when there is a different meta game, when everything's different, I think that is inevitable to at one point have a really useful use for that. But yeah, right now that's in no situation useful.
Sure. It limits design space, I guess. You're forcing design space to be even tighter if you allow for it, basically. So, yeah. I get it.
Well, we have time for a few more viewer questions, and I don't see any right now. So if you guys have any viewer questions for us, just go ahead and throw an @Gwentlemen, and I can go ahead and we'll answer. One thing, speaking of the silvers and golds, one thing I would like is some... incentive, there we go, to having these larger than 25 card decks, because technically you can go up to 40, but there's just no reason to ever. So it'd be kind of cool if maybe if you do at least 30 cards, you get an extra gold slot or something, or you get an extra silver, and 35 you get an extra gold or something. It'd be neat, but I still don't know if it'd be worth it.
Oh, it still wouldn't. I mean, basically, for the most part, no other card game actually has any system that's too similar to this gold, silver, bronze system, and they still use the minimum decks, because in card games, typically, it's less about the gold, silver, bronze, and more about the fact that you've got good cards and you've got bad cards, and you've got a finite amount of cards you're allowed to put into a specific slot, generally like a 2 of in Hearthstone or a 3 of in many other games, and you don't want to dilute that. It's still going to be the same in this game.
Yeah, I think so. And, it's funny because I feel like I vaguely remember being asked in Alpha what we thought of the system, and I don't think any of us really brought up, the fact that it wasn't useful. We were like, yeah, sure, that's a nice option to have. But now that we've seen how this usually plays out, it's almost needless. And if anything, it just confuses new players and gives them And now people are gonna be like, oh, handhold people. It's like, why would you handhold them? Let them learn that 40 cards is bad. It's like, yeah, but you're giving them an opportunity to ruin themselves for no reason at all. And the more I see it, the less I feel like it's necessary. So unless we eventually get a leader that has somehow like a trait that lets you use that, because it's possible we get one and they start using that design space, because it is design space that is completely untapped. Until we get that, I feel like it's it's just unnecessary in hindsight, and I wish I'd brought it up earlier.
All right, Laura, next viewer question. Do you guys have any suggestions to make Wild Hunt more different from a normal weather deck? Any buffs or changes?
Honestly, it's so difficult to come up with a way to make weather feel different if everybody's got access to it. So going back to what I was saying earlier, it's like, if Frost is neutral, then what the hell does Wild Hunt do that's so special? Oh, it plays Hounds. Oh, well, every other leader can do that. Dagon does it better than Eridan. So, what the hell is the Wild Hunt unit for? So we'd have to get Wild Hunt synergies, and by that I mean something like a silver that says your Wild Hunt units are worth like 5 more. I don't care what it would be, but just pitching an idea, it would have to make Wild Hunt, the tag itself, matter, because it just doesn't right now. And like, aside from Wild Hunt Navigator, so we'd have to push that synergy a lot harder, or make Frost exclusive.
Pushing the tag synergy would really help. One thing they could also do is do something with Wild Hunt Hounds, make their trio more impactful, rework it. Because, a large part of the Wild Hunt Navigator is supposed to be that it gives you your reliability over these Hounds, but they have such a weak trio, and they have a pretty weak inherent ability as well, being able to be carried over when you lose, which isn't really great.
It's all right, but it's not really what you want in the card. The card says, hey, rats. I actually like it better than the old Wyvern with Brave, right? Because it's like, here's this thing that's useful if things go wrong for you. But, like, putting it in your deck is like saying, well, you're trying to milk your opponent and lose on round 1 to really maximize their value to get a bad Mahakam Guard. So you have to get the trio for them to be good. Or Mahakam Defender, sorry. So you have to get the trio for them to be really good. And then you're making them more vulnerable to stuff like Gigni, and then just their entire purpose gets defeated by the way they play out, effectively.
Well, the next viewer question, do we think that there are too many agile units?
I think they're hinting at like a direction they're going in. Like, this is just a taste, I think, of what we were looking for in the future. Like, making everything agile is like, not everything, but they're pretty much making, what is like, they're making with Dispatch even more stuff in Northern Realms, for example. The Sergeants were agile as well. So more and more stuff is getting agile. What's like, some cards are getting then limited by not being agile, and then what's the point if only some cards are like, 1/5 of your card pool is going to be non-agile? It's such a weird design that they're in now, but I think they're going full agile with every card.
It was.
Go ahead.
It felt kind of weird at first that they made so many cards agile, because there almost didn't feel like a need for it with the game mechanics, but they're adding more reasons for movement and adjacency and stuff like that. We saw the Clan Brock for hunters and the warships, and you can disrupt those by moving them around, and they're only going to add more of these sorts of things. So I'm actually like, the agility felt really weird at first, but if they kind of just go for it and actually make a game that's more based around everything having the ability to be in different places and add more of these positioning and movement mechanics, then I think it becomes really interesting.
I agree completely. It's something that it feels like a natural progression of the positioning system, where I agree, like going from closed beta where everything is like, this is on this row, this is on this row, and it's just like, whoa, everything got opened up like crazy. But it felt really weird, and then you get to play with it a bit, and you're like, this kind of makes sense, and it makes positioning matter that much more. And I think that if they want to explore that space, which it does look like they're doing, I would not be surprised if we eventually see everything go fully agile, because it adds that layer of depth to the positioning system to be able to position not just on a row but on different rows as well.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things where they were looking for a solution to weather being the most unfun and unfixable mechanic ever, and they're like, how about we just don't make it a problem by just making everything be allowed to avoid it? And it's doing many things at once. So number one, they're able to, so they redesign weather so it's less, I have the last say GG, you lose, so I just make your entire row be 1 strength. And then they give you the ability to dodge it on top of that. So suddenly weather is no longer as big an issue. So I can only imagine what people would say if the weather was like open, was closed beta. Like people would currently be in like throwing a fit. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Oh, my child is dying. Clearly, he's probably getting underfed.
Oh,
By
I thought that was like a bird or something.
Yeah, I know it sounds like a bird. Every time I hear him, like I think I have a parrot in the house. It's good, man. It's like, what's going on? He probably looked at something and it looked back funny. Probably the fridge.
Well, our next viewer question: do you think that they'll keep the meteorite powder to scrap conversion in future patches?
It's too generous. We get too much.
Oh.
There's no incentive to buy kegs.
They definitely will not. That was either an oversight or just an additional generosity that they're not going to do in the future.
Yeah, I'm almost waiting for them to be like, all right, well, we did this once whenever we changed cards and we gave you the full refunds. We're done. That we can say that we've done it now.
Well, no, full refunds are okay, right? Like, it's just the meteorite powder to scrap is not okay. Like, full refunds are 100% fine. It's just being able to take that powder, buff your cards up from, like, 20 scrap to whatever, 400? Is it 400 for rares or whatever? It's like... Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that's healthy. It's like you're generating 380 scrap on the basis of spending 200 meteorite powder. That doesn't seem good.
I mean, the entire point of separating the currencies is completely lost if they're going to just every single patch allow you to convert it both ways. It's it kind of had to have been some form of oversight or possibly a technical limitation that they won't have to deal with in the future.
It's like if you made them premium, it's because you like the cards and all, but you should get back the meteorite dust on it used, but not the scraps, because that's just like apples and bananas mixing. It's just it doesn't go together. It's not the same thing, and they pretty much made it the same thing, which is. And it leads to one side being very overwhelming, and that's the scraps side. And now we can pretty much craft anything, or people that have spent or played a little bit in the game.
Yeah, you don't even have to have played that much either. That's the crazy part. Is like, you don't have to own, like, to have bought 1,000 kegs to get a really good amount. It's like even new players are like, well, I guess we're good to go now. Like, that's fantastic. And I mean, it's great for them to test out the system, but I don't think it's going to stay like that very long.
All right, well, our last viewer question, going back to those bears, what do we think about making the bear a silver card and buffing its strength value to like a 7 or an 8?
I hear this suggestion a lot. This happens every single time there's an overpowered bronze. There's a suggestion thrown forward to make it silver instead of nerfing it. True. That's a weird solution. I mean, it disrupts the entire identity of silver cards, which are supposed to be unique characters in the universe as opposed to just like random bears you find. And beyond that, it's also kind of unnecessary. Like, the card is just slightly overtuned. It probably should just be 5 strength.
Yep, I think if you lower it by 1, you solve the problem, because it used to work okay, like at 4-ish, but it wasn't like an extremely played card. And like with the way Frost works now at 4 strength, you're like, maybe it's not sufficient. Doesn't prevent medics and everything. So I think at 5 it would be just fine. And looking for creative solutions to simple number fixes is like, it's not necessary. Like, don't try to theory craft this. It's like saying, well, what if we make it a gold card with 10 strength and it deals 2, 3 times exactly? It's like, well, no. Let's leave the bear a bear and just let it be a bronze card that's a bit weaker.
I completely agree. And if you do want that idea of a gold card that does something like that, introduce it as a different card.
Yeah, like Vabjorn.
Yeah, like Vabjorn.
No, but if I see a gold card that reads whenever the enemy plays something, ping it, I'll flip a shit because it's so unoriginal. like for all the weakness of Vabjorn, I'm actually happy about the design of it. You know, it's like it's not frustrating me. Like, hey, are you creatively bankrupt? I'm like, no, this is a cool effect. Like, I like this. It's just a little bit undertuned right now.
Yeah.
Do you think the mages are maybe a little bit on the bankrupt side of creativity?
It's tough to say because I think one of the issues we run into is that they try to create this thing where everybody gets a bit of something. Like, oh, here's this Mangonel, here's this whatever. You know, I forget the names of the other ones, like the Warlong ship, and then whatever. Every faction has a deal 2 damage whenever you do X. And it's always that one archetype that has it. So it's like everybody's got that one archetype that's technical, one archetype that's tempo based, one archetype that's, you know, quirky based or whatever. It's like they have like one quirk, one tempo, and one like deal damage to things whenever you do something. It's like it's so weird the way they've designed this, and they're trying to mirror every faction in some fashion. And I think that stems from their desire to make spies, you know, work the way they do, like the Frightener, the Yavin, and everything. Everybody gets one. Everybody gets a mage with a bit of a different flavor. But the flavor right now is extremely similar to the point of maybe not being, you know, different enough. I don't know. Maybe they should look into alternatives.
More choices than just French vanilla or vanilla, or like
right.
other types of vanilla.
They've done a good job too of creating cool concepts. It's not like they can't do it. Like we have examples of really cool designs. It's just those specific ones are. It's like maybe it's meant to be very flexible for every faction, like in a similar way. Like I look at Van Hemar, right? I'm like Stemmelforce Tremors, you know, versus. I mean, I'm forgetting what the name of the Quensign from Ida.
Yeah.
It's like Stemmelforge versus Quensign. I mean, sign me up. I'll pick up the Van Hemar any day. You know, it's like there's no. I get the best weather, and I get the most likely best weather, and I get the best spell. It's like, oh, fair enough, I guess. I guess that's necessary. Like, I don't know how it's distributed. Like, I don't understand that distribution.
Yeah, it is. It is actually a little strange. Some of them are pretty weird. Ida, in particular, is really, really strange.
Dude, I thought she was okay, right? So I put her in my Scartel deck. Next thing you know, the Dagon just caretakers her and makes a fog, and I'm like, well, fuck, she's out of the deck now. Like, I played her for the Clear Skies. I realized that. I'm like, I'll just play Clear Skies. This is not worth it.
Yeah.
Then you have Kira.
Sure.
It's just like a mage with a lot better spells, like, and not a clear weather.
I actually like her though. Like that's the thing is I like gold.
Yeah,
you have a gold mage, but
I don't think every.
Go ahead.
I don't think every faction should have one of those. With
Nah,
like
just
stronger.
make them cast silver spells.
I'm down. Yeah, you're not honestly like you're not even wrong. Maybe like choose one of 2 silver spells might be okay.
Choose one of 2.
Like,
one of the 2 can be the faction silver spell for that faction.
Yeah.
Actually,
I'm down.
sound bad.
Yeah. Actually, doesn't sound bad.
OP.
Well, that is all the time we have for the talk show today. Thank you all very much for everyone who tuned in today. Go ahead and go round the room and any closing remarks. We'll start off with Ruben. Ruben, any closing statements, any shout-outs?
Thanks for showing up, Noxious. It was a pleasure having you. Thanks, Dale and Swim, again for hosting. It's always done great. And sign up for TGO July and check out our website for some great Gwent content. That's it.
Swim, any shout-outs?
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to all the guys from my chat who don't actually really want to watch me, and they're just waiting for the streamer they actually want to watch to come online. This one goes out to you guys.
Noxious, thank you very much for agreeing to be here with us. Any shout outs, any closing statements?
Shout out to Complexity as usual for I think opening up Gwent now. I think they've got a Gwent team going, so they're probably asserting their willingness to consider it as a potential esport with Merchant, you know, being on the team and myself. So that's pretty good news.
All right, well, and again, thank you to everybody. Shout-outs for today. I think I've already mentioned all the tournaments, but I'll mention them again. So you've got the weekly Monday and Tuesday tournaments, Bowstring Tension Cup and TCG Esports, I think is the name of the second one. I really hope so. Good gaming on Sunday. Passiflora, first weekend in July. TGO, us, Gwentlemen's Open, the 8th and 9th of July. So get in there, get those tournaments going, and simply, it's so different from ranked, it's so different from casuals, it's a new experience, and it's something that you can't experience unless you try it, so just try it and see if you like it. But shout out to that, shout out to the Reddit as always, and from the Gwent subreddit you can check out the official Gwent Discord, so shout out to everybody who goes there. It's a great opportunity to meet up with your fellow players and discuss Gwent, because it's really good idea to talk about the game with other players if you want to become a better player yourself. And as Ruben already pointed out, you can head over to Gwentlemen.com. That is our website. We put up a lot of articles for you. We also have the infographic from TGO, the VODs of the cast of the TGO, and one more thing TGO related on there, and I forgot.
Deck lists.
Deck lists from the top 8 players. So thank you everybody who tuned in. I believe that we all do stream, obviously, Swim over at Swimstream. Noxious, is it just twitch.tv/Noxious, or is it something more?
Noxious_GG. Yep.
Right. Ruben over at twitch.tv/RubenVDB. So he's on there every now and then.
Once a year.
Tune in for those, it's a good time. And myself over at twitch.tv/TheWhiteWolf with the spelling down below my name. But speaking of which, I need to go over there and do my stream. So see you all again on this channel next week at same time as always, 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern, 11 CEST. And we'll see you all again next Thursday. Have a good one, guys.
Goodbye.